correct. We did not have requests for public comment.
Okay. Hopefully someday we'll get back to normal meetings because
Very nice.
public comment sucks. We need approval of the minutes of the August 17th, 2020 meeting. Is there any additions or corrections for those minutes? There's no corrections. I need a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion to approve minutes as written.
The second for that motion?
I second it.
Okay. Roll call, Veronica.
This is a board only vote because it was a board meeting. So when I call your name, please say yes, no, or abstain. Roseanne Ibarra,
Yes.
Lisa Judd,
Yes.
Jacqueline Williams, Jackie, you got to unmute.
There we go.
Alright.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Wynn Novotny,
Yes.
Grace Peeler Stankiewicz,
Yes.
Blythe Post,
Yes.
Amanda Archer,
Yes.
Judy Albert,
Yes.
Camille Schrader,
Yes.
Dan McIntyre,
Yes.
Shannon Riley,
Yes.
Rachel McDavid,
Yes.
and Sandra Stolfi.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Then we're going to go down to reports and presentations. Sandra, you have a presentation for suicide, so I'll let you and Veronica do the presentation for the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Yes, I am going to share a presentation. Will Van Sant, who is a social worker, he will start the presentation, and then I will continue with that. So, sharing the screen now. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Will?
Yeah, hi.
Okay?
Sure.
Hi.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks for giving us your time at this meeting. I know you guys have a lot of business to do, so we're going to try and make it quick, but it is kind of a, a subject that can take a lot of time, and, maybe in the future we can spend more time on this subject of suicide prevention.
I'm gonna grab it, come right back. Okay.
September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, so we wanted to kind of coincide this presentation with this month. And this is the VA, the Veterans Affairs, has been doing a kind of big initiative to spread more awareness about suicide prevention. And as you can see, there's some stats here about suicide in the United States. And many people don't realize that suicide is a major public health concern and specific concern for veterans. So the VA has done this SAVE presentation, and Sandra is going to go into what the acronym SAVE is when she takes over. But I'm just kind of giving an introduction here. More than 42,000 deaths from suicide per year in the US, 10th leading cause of death. It's close to 1 million people attempt suicide, estimated, every year, and one attempt every 35 seconds. The VA actually has, because we've been trying to, spread awareness on suicide prevention and training our staff, most of the veteran suicides actually are not under VA care often. Okay, you can go to next slide, Sandra. So actually, Sandra, can you back up one?
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know if you saw I've been kind of going back and forth here. but 18% of all deaths of suicide among US adults are veterans, more likely than the general to use firearms. That's kind of for obvious reasons. Most veterans have have experience with firearms, and on average, there are 764 suicide attempts per month among veterans. And 25% of veterans who died by suicide had no history of previous attempts. Okay, you can go next slide. So yeah, lethal means, so death by suicide is preventable. And this is kind of what we really want to highlight. One thing we really want to highlight is that sometimes people, it's a myth to people say, oh, if someone wants to kill themselves, they're going to do it. Because often it's kind of an impulsive activity. And if they have the means to do it, there's that much more likelihood that they'll do it. So firearms are obviously a main lethal mean. Abundance of analgesic doses, that's painkillers, you know, how many medication, how many pills you put in a bottle. So these are things that are lethal, and if we can somehow make access to them harder, you definitely reduce the number of suicides. And there's some interesting data on this, or research. Then the coal gas thing in the UK that it references there is that they found in the UK, like in the decades after World War II, there was suicide was going up quite a bit, and then it dropped. And they realized when they were trying to figure out why it suddenly dropped is they had changed the way people were heating their houses from coal to gas, and coal gave people access to a lethal gas that people were using to commit suicide, and carbon monoxide. And once they didn't have access to that, the number of suicides dropped quite a bit. So another good example that we have locally here of lethal means access is the Golden Gate Bridge. So the Golden Gate Bridge is widely known as a hot spot. It's estimated that over 1,600 people have died there via jumping since it opened in 1937. Although construction recently began on a safety net, calls for an anti-suicide barrier went unheeded for decades. Among the reasons often cited for not constructing a barrier was the belief that suicidal individuals would just go somewhere else if jumping from the Golden Gate Bridge was made more difficult. In other words, if a person was prevented from making a relatively easy and highly lethal attempt, they would likely simply substitute another site to make an attempt. A well-known 1978 study tested this assumption by examining outcomes of 515 individuals who were restrained from jumping from the bridge between 1937 and 1978. And the studies found that over 25 years later, 94% of these individuals were either still alive or had died of cause other than suicide. So the author concluded of this study that the findings confirm previous observations that suicidal behavior is crisis-oriented and acute in nature. So really, you know, it's all about that moment. And if they don't have the means to end their life in that moment, it's likely that they will not attempt again. 90% of people who survive a suicide attempt do not attempt again. So, okay, so now we're just going to get into this SAVE initiative that the VA is doing. SAVE will help you act with care and compassion if you encounter a veteran who is in suicidal crisis. This is also not just for veterans. This is anyone you're working with. And, you know, I know a lot of you have staff, so you can, we can do this presentation for your staff if you want, but you can also take it and provide it to your staff if you would like to. The acronym SAVE helps one remember the important steps involved in suicide prevention. So SAVE is signs of suicidal thinking should be recognized. That's the S. A, ask the most important question of all, which is you really have to be direct and ask, are you thinking of killing yourself? You know, sometimes it's a hard question for us to ask, but it's found that just asking the direct question is the best way to go forward. And then V, validate the veteran's experience. And E, encourage treatment and expedite getting help. So that's, and then Sandra's going to go into a little more detail on each of these. Okay, important to identifying warning signs. There are behaviors that may indicate or reveal that a veteran needs help. Veterans in crisis may show behaviors that indicate a risk of harming or killing themselves. So Sandra, you want to
Yes,
take over?
yeah, of course. Yes, and so we'll thank you. And so I will start with the letters of the acronym. So it is a signs of suicidal thinking. So the important thing here is we need to learn to recognize warning signs. And there are several here that you can see, like hopelessness, anxiety, feeling that there is no reason to live, or anger, or in doing risky activities. So there are here several examples. So then I will continue with that slide. And so the presence of any of the following signs require immediate attention. So when you are aware or you know that a person is thinking about hurting or killing themselves, or if a person mentioned that is looking for ways to die, or even it's like talking about death or dying, or has self-destructive or risk-taking behaviors. And so this needs immediate attention from you. So it's a must that you need to continue with a second letter that is ask a question. So it's really important to ask a question. You don't need to do it directly, like, are you thinking about killing yourself? You can ask questions like, are you thinking about suicide? Have you have thoughts about taking your own life? So there are do's and don'ts about asking this question. So the do's is like, you ask this question if you have become aware that there are warning signs or symptoms that I have just mentioned. You try to ask the question in a natural way, not directly. Then don't ask a question that is you're looking for a no answer. Like, for example, you are thinking of killing yourself, are you? And also a don't is like, don't wait for long. Don't wait that when the person is leaving the place where you are working to ask this question. The question needs to be immediate. So things that you should consider when you are talking with a veteran or with a client that you think that is a risk for suicide, please stay calm, don't panic, listen more than you speak. And so don't ask many questions, don't argue, maintain eye contact, act with confidence, and be supportive and be honest with your client. So then we move to the third letter, that is B, validate the veteran's experience or your client experience. So you can talk openly about suicide. You have to listen to the person, listen his or her feelings, don't judge, recognize that this situation is serious because the person wants to finish his life or her life. And also, needs to know that there is help that is available, that we have hospitals, that in crisis, that the VA has, even crisis line that I am going to mention soon. So with the E, we finish the SAFE program. The E means encourage treatment and expedite getting help. So if you know that there is a person that is suicidal, so please don't keep this a secret. Don't leave the person alone. And you need to try to get help. And this is, contacting his or her doctor, or go to the nearest hospital. And in the case of the veteran, we have the VA Ukiah. Also call 911. And you continue be supportive with the person saying that help is available. We have a crisis line, and this is the phone number that we have for suicide prevention. And then also a note that I want to mention here is like there needs to be safety issues, because we need to care for your safety and also for the safety of the client. So you never negotiate with somebody that has a gun. So if this happens, get to safety and call 911. Also, if the veteran is have self-harming behaviors, please call 911. And then of course, call the veteran crisis line. So, and then this is, a slide saying that we have suicide prevention information. We have the crisis line numbers, and we also have brochures that Veronica has emailed to you and wallet cards. We have that to provide to you guys. So resources that we have, as I mentioned, we have the veteran crisis line. We have a website that you can see here. You can text to this crisis line. We have suicide prevention coordinators that we have in San Francisco, VA. And also we have committees where Will and I will participate. And so if you have questions, concerns, need immediate assistance, please contact us. And also the VA Ukiah has mental health specialists that, they will be able to support you. And then we have the vet center, which is the Ukiah CBOC, community-based outpatient care. And then we have a website where you can click on this website, and then you will find many resources available for you and your family. Also, we have a PTSD coach. That is an app that you can download where there is a lot of information about PTSD, but also the risk of suicide. So, and this concludes our presentation. Thank you so much, everyone. And of course, it's like we have brochures that we can provide to the agencies. You can email to Will or myself, and then we can mail this to your agencies. And also you have this presentation. If you have questions, you can email it to us. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. Are there any questions, comments? If there are no questions, comments, Veronica, we can continue with the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. All right, Dan, Jackie.
Okay, we're going to do updates from the jurisdictions. Megan?
Hi. Thank you for that presentation, Sandra. That was actually interesting. There were some facts there that I didn't know. Let's see. I'm going to give the the update from the County of Mendocino. So I'll just jump into it. I hadn't planned on updating the group on the Project Home Key, but there's been a lot of fanfare and press about it. So I'll just very briefly update the group on Project Home Key, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. The county was and this was made public last week, was awarded funding from the state. I think we were in one of the first batch of these awards, so there was a fair amount of press about it, for the purchase of a hotel for housing for homeless and at risk of homeless individuals. And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that project here at this board before, so I won't go into a great deal of detail about it. The timeline continues to be very aggressive. The target move-in date is Valentine's Day 2021. So people are we're going to have to figure out how to fill this building super quickly. RCHDC is working with the county on the facilities management side of that project. And Dan and Heather and I have been in close communication and will continue to be, to fully understand the limitations and the regulatory requirements for the residents of the building. So we want to get a better handle on that before we begin more of a public stakeholder process and gathering input. The program design continues, is as of now similar to what was submitted to the application. It's a mixed demographic building with seniors, some small families, veterans, persons living with severe mental illness, people at risk of COVID. And so it's got a couple different populations on it, including some flex rooms that we're not quite clear how they're going to be allocated yet. So there's a whole lot of details to still be worked out, but it's pretty exciting. I'll pause there for a second to see if there's any questions on that. Okay, well, if you think of any, let me know. The second just announcement I wanted to bring your attention to, on page 29 and 30 of your packet is the staff report on the outcomes from the Project Room Key, the motel program that the COC funded and the county implemented together with community partners in the months of March, April, May, June, July, August too. So this is Project Room Key. This is the project that provided housing for individuals that were particularly at risk of COVID-19, as well as families and those fleeing domestic violence. What I wanted to draw your attention to, well, there's two things. I wanted to be able to report back to the community what the housing related outcomes of that project were. But I'm also very aware that this was not a housing project. It was a public health prevention project. So I was looking at it in that sense. In terms of public health outcomes for this project, there have not yet been any outbreaks in our homeless population at our shelters or in our homeless population, or any deaths of a homeless individual yet. We can't be sure that Project Room Key was responsible for that, but I think we can think it might have been helpful in helping to prevent those outcomes from our homeless population. So far it has had and since the project's largely ended, we can just say it appears to have had an important public health outcome. In terms of housing related outcomes, roughly more than half, I think close to 60%, I don't have the percentages on this report, but close to 60% of the individuals that entered that program left to a situation better than they had arrived. So they left to a destination other than the streets. It could have been to permanent housing, could have been to transitional housing. Some of them did go back to an emergency shelter, and there were other outcomes that happened as well. But it was I felt like a pretty exciting and successful project, in that there were definitely people who benefited from that project by having some time and space to plan the next step in their journey and make it there, hopefully. So we still do have, I think there's only 4 individuals left in the motels. These were particularly high risk individuals, and they are supposed to find other arrangements for housing at the end of September. So it will be pretty much closed out by the end of September completely. But the infrastructure is still there, that if something happened that we needed to revive this program, we kind of know how to do it now. I will also just continue to be clear that this project that the COC was involved in and that our staff has been involved in were for individuals at risk of COVID, but not positive and not required to isolate or quarantine. So the individuals that are COVID positive and homeless or required to isolate or quarantine due to COVID, that's something handled by the public health department, and they still do provide that housing for those that need it. Although it's very sparsely used. I don't think they have anybody in those rooms right now. So it's been a kind of something that they've used as needed, but it hasn't been super necessary. Maybe because we haven't had an outbreak in the homeless population yet, maybe because of the work we did. So anyway, the data is there for you to see and look at. This has been shared with county leadership. It may or may not go before the Board of Supervisors in some form in the future. I'm not quite sure yet, but I just wanted to make sure that you all had that information, and I'll answer any questions that you might have about that as well.
So Megan, this is Judy.
Hi, Judy.
Hi. So I think that sounds like a really positive outcome, that up to 60% of the people had improvement over their housing or their situation that from which they came into that. And do you think that was because there was enough case management for these families? Or what do you think tipping?
I think it was both. I think that we were relying very heavily on our community partners to keep an eye on these folks and help them with the stages of their life. and I have to give a shout out to McCavan. They had a very heavy lift there. They were doing an incredible amount of intense work for a number of months, especially. But we had support from everybody, including Manzanita, and I list them all here in RCS. I think that it was the case management. There's a couple different factors. I think having a case manager for those who did have that kind of attention was super important. Some of them just needed that stability to kind of figure out where they were going to go. I mean, I know of at least a couple people who their case managers were able to know where they were in order to get in touch with them, in order to help them get the housing next. Right. So just having a physical place to find the people was important for some of them. And I also will say that the immediate needs housing fund that the county largely paid for definitely was a factor for some people. So there were some people who literally needed some help financially getting to another community, or a down payment assistance or something like that. So that immediate needs housing fund also definitely played a part in some people's path to homelessness recovery. We are not following the same like HUD categories of homelessness. I mean, we have people that left the hotels to go stay with a friend or family, and we maybe paid for a month or two of a room rental voucher on that family. Right. I don't know if that's going to stick. I don't know if they're going to show up back in our system again in a couple months, but because they're all listed in HMIS, we over time will be able to see whether there's some of these outcomes are long-term outcomes. I don't know yet. So that'll be exciting to know, I think, since we do have Brian Klofsky's been really intense about getting a lot of data about these families into HMIS. So if they circulate again back into our homelessness system, we should be able to know by then. Mm-hmm. So that'll be fun. Anyway, that was a long answer, Judy. I think there was a lot of factors that went into it, and
well, yeah, but I think the points that you've made are important points. Mm-hmm. And being that we know that homelessness is going to be with us for a long time, I mean, it kind of feeds into a little bit of, if you provide homeless people with a stable place so that they don't need to worry that I'm going to have to move out for 3 days, but it takes a length of time, things can happen. But, so it's almost, that idea of having a transitional place right. that you can work with people to get them into something more permanent is a real positive.
I agree. And again, I always be clear that I'm still new to this homelessness world. And for me, I'm questioning some of the federal or other concepts that transitional housing is not needed or not good. I don't get that, because I've seen it work for people, not all the time at all. But to me, I found a real role to play for transitional housing for some people who need that stability while they make a plan, because it's so hard to make a plan when you're literally on the streets. Well, or honestly, living in the shelter too. It's not super stable to be in a shelter either. It's much better than being on the street, but it's not that sense of peace that definitely some of our people felt there.
Well, and I'll just, as a plug for that, since our agency got the transitional housing, we've had more success with getting people into permanent housing with the transitional than we've ever had before. And regaining their lives, clearing up their credit, achieving things, and it's just like starting over.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I will say, I mean, one of the other things that we did in this project is, and this isn't a huge number, and this is not exactly what you're talking about here, Judy, but out of the, let me think here. I don't actually have this number right in front of me, but out of the households that we housed, 18 of them maybe, and that's 18 out of 189 households. So maybe 10% really could not maintain behavior to stay in that house. I mean, in that motel. So we did have to ask them to leave. And to me, I just think that's really important. To me, it's just the reality of it. And we literally didn't have the case management support to continue to work with these individuals who could not maintain behavior. So they just had to leave. And I know that's not very popular in some of the like housing first circles or some of the other kind of housing advocate world, but it was a reality we had to deal with. And I still feel like it was important. So
yes, yeah.
So I think this did not work for everybody. And I think that's just another important message that I've wanted to repeat, because there has been some community questions about the new motel program. And I continue to say, this is not going to be the fit for everybody. There are people that need more support and many more chances than we have the capacity to give them right now in order to stay housed.
But Megan, I think, this is Camille, I think that your point is very well taken, and that experience, just like Judy said, we need all kinds of housing options. We need shared housing options. We need congregate housing options. We need co-ops. We need transitional housing. We need permanent supported. We need shelter. You know, that if you have enough of the different types, you can help people not fail up, but be where they can handle it and then build their skill set to move up. Because I can't count how many of our transition age youth, we also have transitional housing that we got a EHAP CD for, I don't know, 10 years ago. Maybe it'll be, yeah, I think it's 10 years in 21. And thank you, Sharon Govern. And it's been very, very helpful with helping kids. You know, they don't make it, they go away, and then they come back and reapply, and they have this whole window of time to sort of help them figure out how to maintain permanent housing.
Mhm.
So,
Jackie, go ahead.
I guess one of the things I'm curious about, our experience with the families we're working with at Ford Street is I felt like the pandemic really focused the mind. I mean, I think there was not a hesitation. People weren't waiting to see if there's something else would work out. I think sometimes, you know, in this population, they're working several solutions at once and trying to figure out what would be best for them. And I think when the pandemic arrived, it sharpened all of us, both care managers and the clients we were working with. I think everybody felt like this might not be the best long-term solution, but I need a solution for me and my family right now.
Mhm.
And so I just think sometimes the timing of things kind of gets us to operate even more efficiently and effectively than we had been.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. All right, so any more questions about that project? And then I have one other update. And I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of time here, but this last one I'm pretty excited about. So I'm switching gears here to, I don't know if all of you know, but another pretty significant project that I manage at the Advocacy and Collaboration team is community outreach related to Medi-Cal and CalFresh benefits, and to some extent CalWorks, but we don't work as closely with CalWorks as maybe we should. In any case, one of my concerns since the beginning of this pandemic, but it has gotten much more significant as this pandemic has dragged out, is that our lobbies here at social services are not open. And although the social services staff are committed to being available by phone and available by online, I have continued to say that is not working for all of our all of the customers in this community, particularly the unhoused, who rely on the lobby for getting a replacement EBT or dropping off paperwork or getting a passport to services or something like that. So I keep saying, to me, I feel like the lobby being closed for this long to get some of that basic needs stuff done is really not working again for some of our homeless individuals in particular. So what has happened as a result of that advocacy on our part is that the eligibility social work, this is not child welfare social workers, it's not even social workers at all. Sorry, I'm mixing up my names. The eligibility division of social services has established kind of like a secret inside line for homeless service providers with a specific eligibility worker who will be your liaison for social services business that your clients are not being able to successfully handle either over the phone or online. So that's not a public person. It's not someone for you to give to your clients publicly to talk to, but it's for you to say, my client has tried to get their EBT card, or they're getting their Medi-Cal reestablished, or this application is taking too long, and this person will be your kind of liaison within the eligibility division for that work. So I want to give it a whirl. I'm hoping it will help some of those people that have not been able to get things done that they need to get done. And I will be sending that information out to the homeless service providers in an email. I'm not going to just do it here publicly because I got to get some of the language right. But I just wanted to announce that's a new strategy that social services is going to try with the homeless service providers. They have it. So the clinics have had a similar kind of inside contact liaison for a couple months, maybe up to a year, and it's worked really well for them. So now you're going to get your own as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and again, I don't know, again, if all of you know that, but that is the work that our unit does as well. So if you have clients that are not able to get their stuff dealt with, make sure you reach out to me. I may not handle it myself personally, but I have other people on my team who are really good at that stuff, and that's what they do. So.
Thank you, Megan. That's really helpful.
Okay. So I will get that out to you guys by the end of the week. I'm not sending it to the full COC board. I'm going to send it to anybody who does homeless service provision, I think. I haven't completely figured it out yet, but again, it's going to be like it's your inside person again, not a public number or a public person. Make sure you reach out to me. I may not handle it myself. I don't know who that was, and they cut off. I think it was Blythe, maybe? I don't know. And Paul, I will say, I don't know if you heard all that. There's a coast person as well. So there's one person inland and one person the coast. And that's it on my update.
All right, thank you, Megan. Shannon, do you want to give an update on the city of Ukiah?
Sure, just a couple things briefly, and I did not have a chance to check in with Captain Keyser before the meeting, but I did get a brief update from PD earlier this morning. In general, violent crime is up. We're dealing with an increased number of overdoses or near overdoses in the last few days. We're thinking that we have some meth on the street that may be laced with fentanyl. Arsons are up significantly. I think we have at least 6 known arson cases in the Ukiah Valley alone. Not sure what's leading to that entirely. So a lot of increased activity for our police department, which is also very understaffed, operating at about 60% staffing. The good news is that we do have several new officers in training, which will allow us to be more proactive in areas regarding homelessness, more likely to be able to participate on outreach teams and things like that. So we do have some good news in terms of staffing. And in terms of housing, we have a new affordable senior housing project being built. They finally broke ground behind Rite Aid. That's going to be about 35 units. So similarly to what we saw with the PEP senior housing project on Main Street by the museum, it will likely result in a shift of some people from other affordable housing projects into this new shiny new complex, and so hopefully free up some other units around the community. So we're looking forward to that. I don't think I have anything else significant for the good of the group. Happy to answer questions if anyone has them. I guess just anecdotally, I will say that it is election season. Homelessness tends to be a hot topic when candidates are talking about election stuff. And so if there is good news to share about progress that's being made, Project Room Key, Home Key, otherwise, this would be an important time to demonstrate that we are making progress in some areas.
Thanks, Shannon.
And that's all I have.
Shannon, can I ask you a question about, first of all, I think you're absolutely right. That's a wonderful idea to make sure that we're letting the community know the good work that's happening along with the challenges that are occurring. In terms of the fires, I've heard quite a bit of cases like this, not just in Ukiah, but quite a few places that they're very, very concerned that these fires are arson fires. And do we think there's some underground, like, is law enforcement able to sort of monitor the web and monitor, I mean, we're sure this isn't some sort of loosely associated group?
That's a really interesting question. We don't have any evidence that would support that. To our knowledge at this point, the cases are not related. Oftentimes they're copycat crimes. You're right, it is. I mean, some of the cases in Southern California have already been deemed arson, up in Oregon, deemed arson. So this is definitely not unique to Ukiah, but it's extremely alarming. We're still very, very early in the fire season. We didn't have these type of fires until October last year. So we are definitely not in the clear. And I don't know that we really know how to address it at this point.
Yeah, there was an incident in Potter where earlier in the day, towards evening, 2 men in a car drove up to the school, broke into the preschool, had to have known something. They were men, and the reason I was worried is because our group home was there, and I was like, please don't let this be our kids. And it wasn't. But they stole 2 backpacks, which had Chromebooks and textbooks and school stuff that had been left in there by the teachers' kids. And then there were 3 fires set within an hour of that. And in one of the fires was this textbook, right? And it just makes you wonder, what were they thinking? Like, where it just feels too too much not to have some sort of driving, messaging somewhere. And maybe not all of it, but some of it just feels like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's scary.
Any other
all I got.
questions for Shannon?
No, that's all.
We're going to go on. Is Tabitha or Sarah here from the city of Fort Bragg?
Neither one of them were able to attend the meeting, but Sarah gave me a call about an hour before, letting me know that, and she asked me to share that the City of Fort Bragg City Council asked her to personally extend their gratitude to both Dan and Shannon for attending their council meeting and presenting on the strategic plan. They are working on, they plan to endorse the plan, and they are hoping to have it on their agenda for the next Monday's meeting on September 28th, as long as staff can get it on the agenda in time.
Thank you, Veronica.
You're welcome.
Is there any other updates from jurisdictions that I missed?
I don't see any others represented.
Okay. We're going to go on to standing committee reports. Give a brief update on the strategic plan. Over the last couple of weeks, Shannon and I presented to the city of Willits, the city of Fort Bragg, and the city of Ukiah. We received verbal endorsements from the city of Willits and the city of Fort Bragg, and they're going to go back and formally endorse it at a future meeting, as Veronica just mentioned. And then the city of Ukiah endorsed it at their board meeting last Wednesday. I think overall the presentations went well, and I think that they were very receptive of the plans, while still realistic that they are really lofty goals, but that's part of being a strategic plan. And part of the process is working through that and making sure that we continue to improve on what we're presenting. Any other thing to add, Shannon?
Yeah, the feedback from all of those councils so far has been very positive. They expressed a tremendous amount of gratitude to the COC and the committee for their work in the development of this plan, recognizing how much effort, how much consensus it took to get there. So that did not go unnoticed. The questions in general that we received were about housing. Dan, of course, was very able to field all of those. City of Fort Bragg had concerns about receiving their fair share of services. We, assured them that this was a county-wide plan. The city of Ukiah had some general questions and also expressed support for dedicated COC staff that would be responsible for helping with the implementation of the plan. So if funding comes down the pipeline for dedicated staff, then that may be something we could consider as a group. But in general, the feedback was very, very positive.
That's all we have, unless there's any other questions. We have one more presentation to do for the city of Point Arena at some future date.
Thank you for doing those.
Angelica, do you have an update on Saltron Solutions?
Just real quick, we'll hope to finalize our safe parking program report at our next meeting. And we're just going to continue our discussions on the decriminalization of homelessness. And our next meeting is this coming Monday at 10 o'clock via Zoom. And we'll be posting the agenda by Thursday. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Angelica. Any questions for Angelica? Sage, coordinated entry discharge planning?
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to find a date for something, but I will multitask maybe. We are, the Coordinated Entry Discharge Planning Committee is planning a coordinated entry training We've set the date for October 1st from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. I'll be sending out an email to all of the agencies that participate in coordinated entry it'll be a training held via Zoom. And so we'll be sending that email out likely by the end of day tomorrow to everybody for the training for the first. It'll be to review our coordinated entry screening policy and the form that everybody uses for coordinated entry screening, and then to review once a person is enrolled in coordinated entry, what does that mean for them and how does the housing process work? And we're really gearing this training towards people who are currently actively involved in coordinated entry. So it's not like a general training for just anybody in the community to attend to learn what coordinated entry is. It's more of a training geared towards providers who are who are the ones doing the screening themselves and case managing clients who go through coordinated entry. And that's the only real update that I've got right now.
Thanks, Sage. Any questions for Sage? Hearing none, we'll bounce to Veronica on the membership committee.
I am pleased to share that we have a new representative here today. Her name is Elizabeth Elliott. As I fumble my words, sorry. Elizabeth Elliott is the executive director for Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority. And she's going to be representing them on the COC. Elizabeth, if you want to take a moment and introduce yourself, you're more than welcome to, but not required.
Hi, everybody. As she said, I'm Elizabeth. I am excited to be taking on this position as executive director. And our organization has a mission this year to provide hope, healing, and housing. So nice to meet all of you.
Thank you.
Welcome. It's awesome to have you here.
And Gary, Veronica, I don't know if Gary's on, I don't see him.
I think I forgot to share the access information with Gary. So point in time, no, that's next one. The HMIS Performance Measurement Committee is going to be receiving some performance measurement information that we are currently putting together as part of the point in time count and the homeland housing inventory count, so the HIC and the PIT. So they're also reviewing monthly performance reports, which have greatly improved. We ran a report in March, and then we looked at a report, I think it was for the month of August, and a lot of the issues that we noticed in the beginning have been addressed by our providers. Data quality is improving steadily. We've also provided annual reports on all projects in HMIS that are involved with HUD in any way, because the federal fiscal year is coming up to an end. The end of this month. So everybody's kind of working on improving their data, getting ready for the APR. I wanted to just put that out there. If anybody's struggling with that, if you don't know who to contact, reach out to me, reach out to Gary. He's the one that's taking point on this. Brian is still in the DOC, hoping next month he might get more time for us. But in the meantime, Gary's doing a great job. Anybody who needs access to HMIS to do coordinated entry or for your housing projects, Gary's the person to start with as well. Anybody have any questions for me?
No questions. We're going to go on to the ad hoc committee report for the point in time count. I don't know if you have something, Veronica, or not.
I believe at the last meeting, I reported that we've received contact from a HUD TA provider reviewing our PIT and HIC information. The point in time count ad hoc committee did meet since the last meeting to review the information that was being provided to the TA provider. A few of them were like narrative requests about why our housing, like for our homeless individuals, we only have 17.75% of that population in shelter. And so they wanted an explanation why we think that is the case. And so that committee reviewed those kind of questions and came up with answers that I've since provided to our HUD TA.
Veronica, can I ask a question? Because I know that we're getting this question out in the public quite a bit more.
Yes.
What is our timeline for bringing either the draft or final pit count to the COC for review? Is it hopefully maybe next month?
No,
No?
my
I
answer
know-
is March.
There's a little bit of information I'm still gathering from service providers. It's a really long story, but we're having to gather after the fact permanent supportive housing project capacity and occupancy on the night of the count. We didn't think we had to do that. HUD changed their mind after the fact. So there's that kind of information that we're having to mine out of HMIS. I'm hoping to have it completed by the end of the week, but then it goes to HUD and they have to process it. So I don't know how long that's going to take on the HUD end. But I could have our final numbers we're submitting to HUD pre-review, like maybe next meeting.
Megan, the answer, I was asked that in all the meetings, and my answer was March, because it's my feeling that submitting unaudited number, and I understand that there's a huge delay this time between one release and the next release. But submitting unaudited numbers, I know last year they changed the numbers, and I'm assuming it happened prior to that. I can't speak to that because I wasn't here. So my answer was March, with the explanation that we felt that it was more important to submit audited approved numbers by HUD than what our assumption was, just for the case that HUD changes their mind again on how something counts or whatever the case may be.
I understand that, and I don't know if this is really the appropriate time to have this conversation, but at some point we need to have it. I too have been fending off, like, what are the pit count numbers? And I did with Veronica, it was like, her first week here, I think last summer, when we suddenly had to fix some problems with our 2019 data. So I'm totally aware that the numbers may change. I think what I am wondering about is the questions from the community and the questions we have amongst ourselves, as well as how are we measuring success? And I don't like the pit count as a measure of success, but it is this thing that everyone hangs their hat on. So I don't know what the appropriate forum is, but I do think that as we need to start, per the strategic plan, we need to start implementing performance measures in contracts and keeping track of what our primary indicators are about whether we're making success. Whether we're having success or moving in the right direction towards reducing homelessness. I just don't know what we're going to be using as our tools to do that. And I don't know what role the pit count will play in that. So it's not really a discussion right now because it's not really on the agenda, but I do think at some point we're going to have to figure that out.
You're right, we do. Veronica?
I just wanted to share on that note that there is a fairly new tool that HUD has released called Stella. It takes all of our system data, not just from our HMIS and our point in time count, and all the different annual reports that we submit to HUD, our APRs, all of that. And it takes it all into one system and generates different types of reports on it. Like there's a racial equity report. I know that there's a report on length of homelessness, return to homelessness, those kind of things. So we only have the 2019 data in there. We don't have the 2020 data yet because it has to be finished. The point in time count has to be finished first. So I'm hoping to have access to that sooner than later. And that could be a way we.
Where do you think that conversation and that decision making should live in terms of what
Strategic planning committee?
Oh, really? Seems like they have to do everything.
Because Or it could be the HMIS Performance Measurement Committee, one of the two.
Okay.
I see that it begins with the strategy in the strategic plan, and then the implementation may fall several places. The other issue is there's real concern or confusion in the community. Many of the people in the community think this takes a long time because we're slow. They don't understand the process. So we got a little information sharing to do along the way.
I agree. I made the mistake of wading into a Facebook argument. Always a bad idea. Really bad idea, but it ended not badly. But the question from somebody who does not share my ideological views at all was like, can we attach, how much success stories do we have for the millions of dollars that were spent or something? And I provided, like, it's very hard to attach a dollar amount to a success story. It's hard to even know what to categorize as a success story. So I was trying to I too would like to be able to see what the cost benefit analysis of things are, but I just don't feel confident in any of the frameworks that we have to be able to do that. So again, I think this is an ongoing conversation. I'm sure you homeless providers have been having for beginning of time and will have to the end of time. But it's something that somebody has to start to address at some point, or not, or have a really clear reason why we're not doing it, which might be
Megan, we experience this in lots of different venues, for example, foster care. And mental health issues. And the challenge is when you do a cost benefit analysis specifically, in order to capture the real benefit, you have to capture the savings in law enforcement calls, the savings in, so it's across so many industry spectrums that it's difficult. It's difficult. If you're just following one funding stream, for example, you could do that, but it's not going to really tell you anything, because it may be that the county paid more for supplemental housing, but that person stopped going into the hospital, right?
Right.
So if we really want to answer the question, we'd have to figure out that ER visits, law enforcement contacts.
I totally agree, Camille. I mean, and you and I know that from whole person care too. One of our greatest success stories, if I look at data, was a client that was homeless and used $1 million in healthcare one year, and then he's like gone, and we're like, wow, we must be really successful. But he was in jail for like 8 months. So how do you, but if you just looked at the data, it looks wonderful. So those kinds of things are really, really, really hard to categorize, and I keep not having success with it.
Right.
Anyway, that was a digression. Carry on, sorry.
I don't have any update on each ad hoc committee. And there's not an update on ESG. So what do you need, Veronica, to disband the 2020 ESG ad hoc committee meeting group?
So just to give some background, ad hoc, the committees are established whenever we need one particular thing done. We've completed the 2020 ESG balance of state application process. It's been submitted, that committee's done, and we can disband it. So I need a motion. Probably from the member, it needs to be a board vote, not a full membership, because this is an ad hoc committee of the COC governing board.
So
I move.
Jackie,
I
second?
second.
Okay. Roll call, Veronica.
All right. When I call your name, please say yes, no, or abstain. Roseanne Ibarra.
Yes.
Lisa Judd.
Yes.
Jackie Williams.
Yes.
Wynn Novotny.
Yes.
Grace Peeler. Thankowitz.
Yes.
Paul Davis is now present. And so Paul?
Yes.
Thank you. Not here. Karen Lovato joined, and then I thought Sheila left, and I'm not sure if she's on. Are you here, Karen?
Yes, she is. She's on via phone.
I changed.
I am on the phone, but I wasn't able to hear what we're voting on. What are we voting on?
It is to disband the 2020 ESG ad hoc committee. They finished their funding recommendations and aren't needed anymore.
All right, then I am voting yes on that, and I apologize. I've had really bad connectivity today.
No problem. Glad you're here. Blythe, Post.
Yes.
Amanda Archer,
Yes.
Judy Albert. Judy?
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. Camille Schrader?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Dan McIntyre.
Yes.
Shannon Riley.
Yes.
Rachel McDavid.
Yes.
And Sandra Stolfi.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you, Veronica. And we're gonna go on to funding updates. Jackie, you want to give an update on the cash outcomes with the, I believe you have that letter?
Yeah, I'd like to. Before I do that, I wanted to welcome Elizabeth Elliott again and tell you that this is a really loud, chatty group you just joined. And we're just polite and quiet because we're on Zoom. So please don't be a stranger. If you, reach out to any of us, it will be easier to get to know all of us when we're not locked up in our offices and homes. But again, I'm so pleased you joined the group, and don't have the impression that this is a quiet, shy organization. It's not. So with that, I wanted to share that we completed the first 10 months of a cash-funded project that Ford Street put together. This was utilizing dorm rooms for families experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. It was an attempt to just add additional housing opportunities. We were working on it during the fire situation, and when the cash funding came along, we were able to implement. One of the things that we didn't know when we put the program together is we really didn't know would the families be able to contribute at all to the cost. And so, we created this 2-year program to help us understand what it really costs to support families and what kinds of supportive services they may take advantage of or need. So literally, when we put the program together, we then realized there wasn't enough cash funding to do all of our dorms, but because we felt we needed to offer as much housing as possible, we've used the cash funding to kind of fund all of them except 2, and then Ford Street, as you'll read in the documentation, just in kind covered the 2 that we couldn't afford the cash funding to collect the $44.50 a day. One of the things that was interesting, we did learn that with just the 30% of your income request, that families were able to contribute. And so the average contribution of the families was around $240 a month. And so that was good, again, good information for us to understand what the capability, economic capability of these folks can be. We offer them breakfast and dinner and housing and on-site laundry. We also provide other workshops and supportive services at Ford Street, as many of you know, vocational stuff. But with the pandemic, that stuff's, the big workshop, everybody in the conference room stuff has really slowed down. But what hasn't slowed down is us working one-on-one with them to help them with their housing needs. And so even though, this is a really scarce commodity, we were able to help several folks get housed. Let me see. So it was, again, I don't have 12 months of data for you yet because when the contract started. So during the first 10 months of the program, 8 families left the program, and 6 of them were housed, permanently housed, and 2 families were exited for non-compliance. And the most common issue with non-compliance is unwilling to follow our rules, and some of our rules around sobriety and not bringing contraband and things on property. So when we look again, I agree with what Megan and Camille were talking about, cost benefit. I don't know if we'll ever get to the benefit part of that equation, But I feel like it's really important for us to start talking about the cost. Mainly, a couple of comments that came from the even Ukiah City Council about their support for the strategic plan was around improved accountability or improved explanation around the funding we're receiving and how we're utilizing it. And so, coming up with kind of streamlined ways to help the community understand that with the bucket of money that we received, we set aside $12,000 for shelter diversion and then divided up the rest of that money to serve families, and then what the success rate it truly is. So given the pandemic and given all we've gone through with housing scarcity, I think it's kind of amazing that we were able, to house a sixth of the families. It's also important to know that these are not huge dorm rooms. So most of the families we serve are smaller. Many times it's a single parent and 1 or 2 children. So for that same time period now, we serve 15 families, which were made up of 15 adults and 28 kids for a total of 43 people. So the difference between the people that were asked to leave and the people who are housed are the folks that are still with us. So I'm feeling positive about this program. I'm surprised of really being able to help people attain permanent housing during this time, and really pleased. I also think when you look at our cost, it's really hard to argue with the efficiency of the dollars. So to help, again, a small family for a cost of $101 a day, which means room and board for them, I think that's pretty amazing. So again, we probably need 3 times the amount of this capacity wise, but it's a beginning. I also thought that in some situations, the people in our dorms might end up being candidates for our apartments, the 12 apartments we have at 4th Street. There's just virtually little to no turnover in that kind of housing. So such good news to hear about the additional senior housing, because I think, a number of apartments like that will start that kind of ball rolling in inland, because there are folks that probably live at the end of 4th Street in RCHDC housing that, would be more appropriate in senior housing now to make some of that family units available. So again, fingers crossed, we're more to do, but at least we're moving the needle. So does anyone have questions about our program?
So can you tell me what did you add into that $101 a day? Does that include staffing,
yes,
food, utilities,
right,
all that kind of stuff?
Right. So we provide 24/7 staffing because it's a sober living environment. So there's staff on site all the time. So the staff includes the salaries for 3.5 client service people. Those are our direct service people that interface with the clients. 90% of the cost of the program supervisor and 10% of the cost of Drew.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because there's other apartments there that Drew's responsible for, Drew is kind of a shared resource between this program and the food bank.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks, Jackie. Veronica?
Real quick, I was just wondering, Jackie, if you happen to know where those 2 households that exited, where they went to? Did they go stay with family, or do you know?
I could find out. I know Drew knows, and I think one situation was that, but another one, I think they were leaving the area. So I'd have to double check. I don't want to rely on my poor memory.
Because just because they were exited for non-compliance doesn't necessarily mean they were
Right.
exited into homelessness,
Right.
which is two different things.
Right.
That's all. Thanks.
Veronica, do you want to have fun explaining this ESG thing? Because I think I'm still confused.
Actually, I'm going to turn it to Megan. I know it has my name, but we discussed it and she's going to take it.
You're on mute, Megan.
You're muted.
Thanks, sorry. So we're seeking direction from the board today on resolving a situation. At the last strategic planning meeting and then the subsequent COC meeting, we received direction to prepare and issue an RFP using the county processes. Sorry, I'm gonna let my phone's ringing, but I don't want to hang up on the person, so I'm just gonna let it ring. Anyway, so we were given direction to issue an RFP for emergency shelter services for those shelters that were impacted by the pandemic in order to successfully distribute the ESG CARES Act funding, of which, as a reminder, the first allocation of ESG CARES Act funding is roughly $700,000, of which roughly $500,000 was recommended for emergency shelter grants, emergency shelter services. And then there's another allocation coming sometime in the next month or two that will be, we think, several $1 million. So that's the funding that we were working on with this RFP for emergency shelter support. We've prepared the RFP. We had a timeline for issuing it. That's still happening, but we were informed on Friday that contracts resulting from an RFP cannot be retroactive. And so although the funding source will allow us to backdate this money pretty far back, all the way to the beginning of the pandemic, I was being told by the county processes that we could not make the contracts resulting from an RFP retroactive. So I could argue this, and I kind of like started to argue it, but I'm afraid that if I argue, I could not win that argument and more time will go by. So we came up with a kind of interim plan in that we would let the RFP process happen. The resulting contracts for that RFP would begin January 1st and would be for at least that calendar year, so the 2021 calendar year. But we would also reach out to existing emergency shelters that are listed in our HIC report. So there are 4 in our community, and offer them the opportunity to express interest in COVID-related emergency shelter funding for the months of September, October, November, December. Veronica, September is going to be new to you. I think I can pull off September. So start date of a kind of bridge funding contract for those 4 months, with the understanding that any shelter that felt like they had COVID-related needs for the calendar year 2021 would still be expected to go through the RFP process. So I hope that makes sense. I couldn't figure out any other way to resolve this issue. The tensions I think that Veronica and I continually have to balance is a commitment to a fair, transparent process and a commitment to being flexible and efficient, and they don't always line up. So if we're being super fair and transparent, we're using this RFP process, I still think that's the right thing to do, but it makes our ability to get money out quickly, particularly in an emergency situation, super hard. So trying to balance those two, and that was our proposal to the COC board today. And I'll entertain questions about that, or if Veronica, you want to answer any questions or add any more.
I don't really have anything to add other than we're really just trying to get this money in the places where it's needed, and do it quickly. And the RFP just isn't going to allow us to have that flexibility to get that backdated.
What were the 4 other emergency shelters identified?
So the 4 emergency shelters that we currently were identified in our HIC report, our Housing Inventory Count report, are Project Sanctuary, Mendocino County Youth Project, Hospitality Center, and RCS Building Bridges. So those are the existing federally recognized shelters. And so our thought was we would stick with those 4 in terms of finding out if they had COVID-related gaps, I guess, really. So the concept would be, if we get this direction from the COC board today, Veronica will contact them this week. They need to tell us, we'd have to do this quickly. They need to tell us by Friday whether or not they have COVID-related emergency shelter needs and, the general budget concept of what that would be. And then so we can start working on the contracting process. Again, all of these shelters and new shelters or people who want to provide new sheltering service in 2021 would need to go through the RFP process.
Shannon?
Yeah, I want to thank Megan and Veronica for their out of the box thinking to solve this problem and their flexibility in this situation. I think it is still in the spirit of the Strategic Planning Committee's recommendation, and to support existing programs is an important component of the strategic plan. So to have identified those 4 recognized shelters in this case, I think is appropriate. So I support the recommended action.
So Megan, I want to also thank you and Veronica. I think Shannon said it perfectly. As this group knows painfully, Building Bridges did not have operational funding to keep it open till November, and still do not have the kind of security that says, okay, we're taking a leap of faith here because we don't want to do this in the middle of COVID and just after everybody else is being disrupted. And yet the winter shelter starts November 1st. So I truly appreciate the flexibility and the out of the box thinking to try and support the current shelter projects having an answer and the support they need until the RFP. Thank you.
Megan, correct me or just inform me, when was the RFP due in? I forget what we said.
Well, our original intention was that it would be issued September 21st, which still might happen, but now they're kind of like, oh, good, we have more time. So it might be a little bit more time. Actually, that's today. So obviously it wasn't issued today. So that was the original intention, that the applications would be due October 8th, and we were going to backdate them to September 1st. It was that piece that I was told would not be possible. And again, this was just on Friday, and I'm like, I know it has to happen. And then I'm like, maybe I might lose that fight. So I think the timeline will now be changed a little bit. I still want it to be fairly aggressive. And so I'm assuming the deadline for the RFP will be something like mid-October, and we'd still need to make the funding decisions by mid-November for contracts that would start January 1st, if that makes sense.
The gap funding is between now and the end of the year.
The end of December, yeah.
All right. So we just need a motion to move this direction forward.
I make the motion to move forward with this gap funding and the RFP process.
A second.
The two.
Blythe?
I'll second, or Dan seconds.
I got Blythe down as seconding. Is that right?
I saw Blythe light up.
Yes, I was very excited.
Veronica, roll call, please.
Okay.
So Veronica, I think people who are likely to be offered this funding should probably recuse themselves.
Yes. Sorry, guys. Hold on just a second. I need to find room to write in your answers. Okay. When I call your name, please say yes, no, or abstain. If you are a shelter provider who intends to try to access this funds, please vote abstaining. Roseanne Ibarra.
Yes.
Lisa Judd.
Yes.
Jacqueline Williams.
Yes.
Susan Wynn Novotny.
Yes.
Grace Peeler Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Paul Davis.
Abstain.
Karen Lovato.
Yes.
Blythe Post.
Yes.
Amanda Archer.
Same.
Judy Albert.
Abstain.
Camille Schrader.
Abstain.
Dan McIntyre.
Yes.
Shannon Riley.
Yes.
Rachel McDavid.
Yes.
Sandra Stolfi.
Yes.
Dan, is this a board vote or is this a full membership vote?
The board vote.
I'm sorry?
Just a board vote.
Okay, motion passed.
So thank you for that direction, and Veronica and I will get on that as soon as we can, and I will encourage those who receive an email soliciting their information to do so as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. There's nothing else on this. We're going to move on to item 3 for the heat funds. There is no update, Megan, I assume, correct?
Nope. No.
Okay. HAP funds, do you need us to take action on this, or do we need to have the board authorize the chairs to approve funding? How's the timing going to work on that, Megan?
I don't think, I think we might as well wait till next month, because I think at next month, and Veronica, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll actually have more award information for the second round. So that would be a more appropriate time to make any decisions related. Oh no, I'm talking about something completely different.
Yeah, we're talking about the gap.
Yeah.
If there's
What are we talking about?
If there's a gap between what we can spend in ESGs under the previous motion versus.
Well, we won't have that gap because we're only doing 4-month contracts. So I think that we'll want to next month look at what more we know about the ESG round 2, okay, and then decide then whether we need to include HAP or we want to include HAP in those allocations. So I don't think we need to take any action or even really talk about it this month, Veronica, unless you're, and I think what we'll probably do next month, and I'm totally thinking out loud right now, is come back again. We'll know more about ESG round 2, and we'll also know more about the other RFPs we were planning for both outreach and landlord tenant liaison person. So we can do that next month.
Okay. And there's no.
Yeah, the reason I included this was just to provide an update that if during that RFP we receive more funding requests than we have funding in ESGCV, that the Strategic Planning Committee recommended that to fill that gap, we use HAP funding. That was really the only reason I added it.
Okay, we'll wait till we get the RFPs in.
Okay.
No update on FUP. No update on housing. I think the next thing, I don't know if Lisa, if you want to touch on number 8 for the mainstream voucher funding.
You're more than welcome to, Lisa, but I know you didn't add it. I added it because I knew it was about the ear.
That's okay. We submitted for mainstream vouchers. I think we submitted, I believe, don't quote me on this, 75, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll get that many. So they usually, last time when we requested, we got less than that. So we're just moving along in the process. We have 100% utilization right now. So I think we have high chances of getting some of those mainstream vouchers. So we're excited about that.
That's good news. And then to add on to the housing comment from Shannon earlier, there will be additional housing in the county. I know right now it's outside the city ordinance on our first phase of Ore Creek, which will open in May of 2021. And we will be building another one right next to it, starting sometime, hopefully in March of 2021. So that'll be another 80 units on top of whatever else is being constructed in town.
And Dan, is that just low-income housing, or
It's
is
low income. It's the first phase, and I don't have the exact numbers on me, but it's 49% special needs and 51% standard affordable. We have some funding commitments though, that there are some specializations for some. The name's skipping me, but there's some allocations to certain housing elements for the first award. So, but there will be some units that are just open to standard affordable at that facility. And hopefully it's going to allow us to use some FUP vouchers to. For the
And it seems the mixed use model is more common now.
The mixed use model is the only thing we can fund now. So what we were able to fund at Willow Terrace is not going to ever happen again. There was, I won't say there was loopholes in the law, but there was, this perspective that type of full affordable housing for special need was important and was the way to go. That's not how TCAC and the funding sources see it. They want to see only 49% special needs. Plus, we run into Article 34 allotment issues, which limit us to the 49% as well, because there's not been another election for Article 34 in the county or the city for since like the 80s. So there's some technical issues on the side of affordable housing that complicate special needs as well.
And Dan, what falls under the category of special needs? I mean, beyond mental health. I mean, is it
I think there was some TAY youth allocated over there at this one. I believe there's some TAY youth. I believe there was some that meet the same definition of, like, say, Willow Terrace was. And then there was some units outside of that special needs for the regional center.
Okay.
But I don't have the exact split, Judy, because we're working on like 8 concurrent projects. So trying to keep them all straight in my head is not.
Sure.
But it's just more housing. So I strongly believe anytime we add a door, it frees doors. And that's, we're starting to see that. We're starting to see that effect because, we have these units going in, we have the seniors behind CVS. We have some market rate stuff further down the street on Gobi that's going to be coming online. And, we're starting to see some of that stuff free up housing. And we're also seeing, from our perspective, is we're seeing people that are not relocating, but we're actually housing people that have been unhoused more rapidly during this COVID versus people just relocating from one apartment to the next, which is extending our waiting list time or time of vacancy on units. But we're seeing people get housed that are living in less than sanitary or underhoused, right? Particularly families. So that's a good perspective. I mean, it hurts us on a vacancy side because our vacancies are extended and we'll have to work through more people, but we're seeing less people move from one occupied house to another occupied house. So that's kind of gives us some hope that we're bringing up some bedrooms.
Dan, just to clarify for the minutes, you said that Ore Creek, that part of it has a start date of April 2021?
The first phase is under construction right now, and I believe is scheduled to finish construction in May of 2021. Once we're allocated full housing, once we're allocated tax credits for the second phase, which we will not know until October 10th. We suspect we're going to get an allocation, but we're not positive yet because we've not been awarded. But if we do get an award, that would probably start construction March or April of 2021.
Okay. Thank
for
you.
The second phase.
And that first phase, there's 20 project-based vouchers with CDC.
That's correct. Okay, if there's no other questions or any projects, are there any announcements, Veronica?
Not that I have.
Okay, well, the next board meeting will be October 19th at 1:30 in our famous Zoom room.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good month.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.